I dove into this a couple months ago as it was starting to float around and come into play, but I think it's worth a larger discussion today on air. And Washington State is back to legislating my job. That's basically so. The real estate industry has been going through massive amount of changes. There's been national pressure. I've talked a lot about it on the show. Over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, there's been changes in how agency works, how your relationship with your agent is, who's paying what commission. Mm-hmm. And now they're back at needing to legislate where your house is going to be advertised. I would not have thought that this was a law that we needed. If this was on my bingo card 2 years ago, I would not have thought this was a law we needed. But Washington has decided to step into a national disagreement, I would call it, on what's happening with the industry and where they're going. So this is Senate Bill 6091, and it regulates what they call private listings in Washington State. So the first thing as a consumer that you might be asking is, what is a private listing network? I'm not even sure what you're talking about. And so what a private listing network is it is a list that a broker or brokerage would have. Okay. That, John, if you came to me and said, hey, Lance, I'm ready to list my house. I want to get it sold and I want to get it listed. And I said to you, you know what, John, before we really go public with this deal, I've got a curated list of buyers, about 100 buyers or so that I've been working with, or I've got some agents that really sell a lot of homes. Why don't I float this out in my private network before we let the rest of the public know about your listing and see what happens with that?
Here's the thing, and this is where, again, Washington State sounding like the little kids sitting at the kiddie table at Thanksgiving, and they want to sit with the grown-ups. So this is what they're doing. The purpose of a private listing is, especially if you have an upper-end property, you have a list of people that financially they can handle this. So why not show it to them first instead of being legally mandated to have to show it to, and no diss on first-time home buyers, but they want you to have to go out and say, okay, show it to everybody, even if they are in no way, shape, qualified, even on the horizon.
That is one of the arguments. I absolutely love that I did zero prep for you on the show. You didn't come in, and that is one of the arguments. That is one of the...
That's kind of a business. That's kind of common sense.
Yes, it is. The argument that they're using, though, is a lot of data has come out that roughly 50% of those sellers end up converting to a multiple listing, an MLS type listing, to maximize their value.
Oh, okay.
So now I'm going to play devil's advocate for you a little bit in this situation. Let's say even in the example you gave, we go out to those 40 buyers that we know can financially afford it. And Lance picks up one of those buyers, and then all of a sudden I'm on both sides of that transaction, collecting both commissions. And yes, it's a very smooth sale, and that sale goes through. And when it records at the county, I get a call from somebody in Montana that was relocating from Montana. And they said, geez, this is the one I've been waiting for. What did that sell for? Well, it sold for, $735,000. You got to be kidding me. I've been in Tri-Cities the last 3 weekends looking, and I've been looking to spend about $800, and this is the best thing I've seen. I would have paid $800 in a second. And so Lance over here is the broker, is like, I just collected dual commissions. I'm happy as a clam. John thinks he's happy, but he might be light about $65,000 as he left the transaction. And so that's the argument on the other side of the equation. So you got to look at, in this fight first of all, what's the fight look like on the national level? Well, I will tell you on the national level, the biggest proponent of this is the largest residential broker in the United States, and that's Compass. Compass recently bought Anywhere Brands. Those merged. And you might be thinking, man, I've never heard of Compass.
Nope.
And you're like, okay, in the Tri-Cities. But then when you look a little bit deeper, they own the Better Homes and Gardens franchise.
Oh.
They own Century 21.
Okay.
They own ERA. They own Sotheby's, Coldwell Banker. Oh, a couple of those you might have heard of.
Yes.
So now you look and you're like, oh, man, they're trying to control the private listing network with private exclusives. And if they do that, then smaller brokerages or other brands are not going to have access to those homes for their agents to sell. Maybe then more of those agents will come work at those companies.
Oh, I see.
And so then they're looking at Washington's like, is this the best thing overall for consumers? It might not be. Let's put the kibosh on this at a state level, even though what's happening with the argument at the national level. Here's where it gets really, really interesting for me just in the last 5 days. I almost couldn't even believe this. So before I came and talked about this on my little radio show, I had to do a number of hours of research because I wanted to make sure I was clear what I was hearing from the Washington Association of Realtors. There's a number of great podcasts out there that they have been on recently talking about. Realtor.com, Zillow, everybody has an opinion on this. So it's really interesting because Compass released a statement to Realtor.com and they wrote an article earlier in the week. And they said they have a coming soon listing agreement, coming soon status that they can list things on. And they said, and the exact quote from the article was that they have, that they feel like that they are, exactly what they said was that they are fully compliant with the new law, that their private exclusives and Compass coming soons are fully compliant with the new law. And then they went on to say, the spokesperson explained that their private exclusives are only private online and that consumers and real estate agents from other firms can visit the Compass office to see them.
Oh.
Like can go and look at either their physical or their digital book in their office. They're saying that they've complied with this. So you're telling me in 2026, the semantic games that we're playing is that you're looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Mm-hmm. And you're like, gosh, Lance, I want you to be my agent. I want to look at these 10 that are available. And I went on Zillow and I went to the MLS data feed and I saw those and those are all on there. But gosh, there's, I think, do you know, Lance, if there's any on the Compass Private Exclusive Network? And I'm like, well, I'm not at that brokerage, but let me not look online. Let me not look out on normal advertising. Mm-hmm. Let me get in my car and drive over to C21 and then look at their physical hard copy book. And then let me drive over to Sotheby's and then look at their book. And then, when I get done driving around all day, mm-hmm. I'll get back and tell you, are you effing kidding me?
Wow.
Like we are, I honestly, before I brought this to the radio show, I looked at that quote 3 times because I felt like we are going back to 1981 mm-hmm. and hard copy MLS books. And that's what Washington's really trying to prevent. So I think in their viewpoint, in the Washington Association of Realtors as well, is they're saying like, we're trying to prevent the market from going backwards 150 years. That was a quote that I saw to where, and what happens is if that starts to happen, then you don't so much have a real estate agent. You have brokerages that own inventory, and you have to go to each individual brokerage to get access to that inventory. Mm. And then you eventually don't have buyer agency representation because your buyer agent, the likelihood of me doing what I just described is almost zero. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's your choice, Lance. But I think what's going to happen is this is going to be this is going to be decided by case law. This is brand new, right? We're not going to know the answers to these questions till there's case law. I don't want to be a part of that case law. I can guarantee you freaking tell you that, right? But it's going to happen because you're going to have to make the decision on, is that really public? And that's the definition that is not in this bill. Let's say that in my property management brokerage, let's say that I have a landlord that comes to me, the tenant vacates, and the landlord's like, Lance, you know what? I think I want to sell the house instead of re-renting it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. And then they say to me, you know what though? Gosh, I mean, you work with hundreds and hundreds of landlords, Lance. Why don't you just shop this around to your existing landlords?
See if they want to pick up another rental.
See if they want to pick up another rental for me, and let's get this thing sold. Prior to last week, that would have been a request that I could have said to that landlord, yeah, you know what? Let me do that. They're like, I just don't want to hassle with it. And I don't want to do a lot of, cleanup and pictures and stuff. So let's just see if you can knock that out in your network. That would be now, currently in today's market, a violation of this new law. So once I got that property listed, as soon as I hit that send button to that list of landlords, that home would also have to be available, marketed to the general public. Now, what's the easiest way for a licensed realtor to comply with that? Stick it in the MLS, and then you immediately comply with that. It's syndicated to hundreds of sites. And so that's one way to handle that. Now, John, before the break, had pointed out some of the arguments. John said, well, what if it's a really high-end house and I only want it to go to qualified people and I don't want to waste my time with unqualified? Well, that is a valid argument and one that we hear on the other side of it. The other side that we hear about on this is what's called seller choice. And John and I may or may not have had a discussion about libertarianism off the air on the break, which I think a lot of people would say, well, gosh, I just want to have, seller's choice in this situation. So let me give you, John, an example of seller's choice.
Okay.
So an owner owns a small restaurant and cooks in the back of his restaurant. His waiter's up front. His waiter takes an order, and his waiter takes an order for chicken. Chicken meal looks real good. Goes in the back, goes back to the chef, who's also the owner, and says, hey, I got one order of the chicken, and just wanted to let you know he would like that dish rare. What's your response as the owner there, John?
Salmonella.
Yeah, but it's seller's choice.
Okay, I see.
I backed you into a corner on purpose.
No, but that's a good one, though.
And at that point, that owner's going to say, I'm not doing it. Like, the risk isn't worth worth what's happening there. And, the other argument that against this, to where we think Washington might have really done some good with some of this legislation, is that it would be really, really easy in some of these private listing networks to start to see a pattern that I think would eventually violate fair housing laws. If you started to look up at the makeup of some of the private listing networks, and then you got into income requirements, and then started to look at all of the different ways that could,
showing it to people even though they financially qualify could be considered
that could become
financially discriminatory.
There could be all kinds of situations in these private listing networks that happen. So by doing this, they are eliminating that possibility, automatically. And I'm not saying that exists anywhere, but it would be really, really easy to see how that pattern could start to be happening. So you got to just kind of look at overall, the Washington Association of Realtors, I think what they're trying to do is a noble quest, and that is to make, the best consumer buying experience, in the state of Washington. And by buying, I also mean buying and selling. They really want to make that transaction transparent And a lot of the laws we've seen happen in the last 3 years have dealt with transparency, even to the effect of now when they felt like referral networks were kind of getting out of control. Like somebody refers you to somebody else, how do you know what that agent's intentions are if that referral is not disclosed? And so, disclosing referrals now, having to say where that money is going in that transaction behind the scenes per se. So, the cause is noble in that situation, is that they are trying to make that best consumer experience and make sure that the consumer is well protected in that. I think there's going to be, more of this coming down the pipeline. You and I talked off the break as well, that for me personally, running a smaller independent firm, which I do for a number of reasons, it gives me a lot of flexibility. I can make decisions fast. I can pivot quickly to help the consumer. But without something like this in place, I would say that there could have been a competitive disadvantage against those private listing networks. If, if 5 of the largest firms in town control, 60% of the business, and then my buyers don't have access to those listings at the same time.
Unless they drive down there.
Unless I spend my 90 hours a week driving around as the example given before the break. It would be somewhat harder to compete. So from that indie brokerage, independent perspective, there's a lot of me that really likes what this legislation did. I like to sell homes to people. I like to help people sell homes. I like buyers to buy homes. And if people are worried about where they're going to see that information and who's going to be hiding it, we spend a lot of energy worrying about that as opposed to me going out and helping consumers buy and sell homes. That's what I want to do. And so I do think if I'm grading this at the end of the day, that it's a win, in that situation, because I think it does prevent some shenanigans from happening.
Yes.
Now, these are independent business owner real estate agents. Are there still going to be shenanigans? 100% yes.
Yep.
There's already national companies. I read you the ridiculous statements before the break. There's already national companies saying that they comply in a way that I feel is the most ridiculous statement I've read in the last month. Month. So it's already happened, but that is also competition, and competition is, I think is good for the marketplace. And so that's people, that are definitely interpreting this in their manner. We're not going to know until this is challenged by case law. This is audited by the Department of Licensing. And so they control our licenses. That's who, lets me buy and sell real estate based upon that. And they're going to be monitoring through this by self-monitoring when people are turned in. Because if people are violating this, I guarantee there's going to be agents that are going to be turning other agents in. And then there's going to be audits done. The Department of Licensing regularly audits our files. They come to our office. They make sure we're following all of those laws. They, spend a number of days. Sometimes it takes weeks going through everything. And so this is another checklist item that they're going to be looking for in that environment. So we won't know more until there's case law, and I guarantee it won't take very long.
Before it ends up in court.
There will be case law coming about this. In the meantime, for us, very much business as usual, with the added caveat that we are going ahead and just making sure my whole team knows 100% nothing gets listed on Facebook, Instagram, etc. until that's been put in the MLS. Nothing gets sent out to, a singular group of investors until we've had that put in the MLS. So just making sure that our entire team is complying with that and moving forward, so that we're following the letter of that. I'll let somebody else figure out what the shenanigans are later, so we can avoid that. If anybody has any questions about, is your listing getting marketed to the entire public outside of all of these networks, go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. We will gladly do an evaluation of that to make sure you are being served in the best possible manner.